Hello everyone. So as most of you know, we were going to take our chapter test right after our 3-day weekend, but due to going on a shutdown, we did not have a chance to do that. So we have one lesson to finish up within the chapter 7, and then I am giving you guys the review, and then you're going to have a modified test. It's only going to be 6 questions. It'll be fairly simple. It'll all be on Canvas. So hopefully that won't be too bad. I feel pretty confident in giving you guys this test simply because we've already gone through the majority of all of this stuff, of all the material leading up to us not being in school. So what we're going to look at today is taking and finishing up the last section, so 7.6 from your guys' workbooks. Hopefully you all have those. If you don't, I will have a PDF attached to our Canvas announcement about this lesson and this week's information, just so that way you can take and look at that and put your answers on a separate sheet of paper and write down what your answers would be for each of those questions. Or if you have the ability to print, you can take and print out that part, so then you can take pictures of it and send it back to me. Okay, so with that being said, so how we're taking and doing this, most of you I'm pretty sure have your workbooks. There may only be a few of you who don't. Hopefully you all do, but if not, like I said, I will have that PDF available for you guys to look at. But for those of you who do have your workbooks, you're just going to take and work in your workbooks just like we would if we were still in school. You're going to put your answers, put your work. Make sure when you take and write what your final answer is, you circle it or make it known so that way I know exactly what your final answer is, so I don't mark you wrong because I don't notice it, since being as we'll be submitting these things online, it won't be as easy for me to grade as what it would be in person. So keep that in mind as you're taking and working in your workbook. As for how we're going to take and do our lessons, basically I'm going to take and walk through doing just like what we would any other time. I'm going to do some of the problems from each of the sections on your assignments, and then you guys will take and finish the rest of it for your work. So it'll be just like if we were still in school, still together. Like I said though, you guys are going to be doing a review, so you'll have one lesson of me kind of guiding you through stuff, and then I will have the review as a document for you guys. I will share that out with you. It will be a view-only Google Doc, and then what I'm looking for you guys to take and do is make a copy of it. You can make a copy of it, so a few different options. You can make a copy of it, and then you can write on the document what your answers are. So that's one way to take and do this, and then share that back with me so then I can take and grade it. If you don't like that idea, or if that can be confusing, because I know obviously trying to write mathematical answers in a Google Doc isn't always the easiest thing to do, but if you don't like that method, you can take and print it. Now obviously I know most of you probably don't necessarily have printers at the ready to take and use, but if you do, you can always print it out, and then you can just write on your review, and then take pictures of that or scan it and send it back to me so I can grade it. If neither of those options, so printing it or take and writing it in the document, if you don't like either of those, like I said, for those of you who don't have workbooks, you can also do this. You can take and look at like with the review, you can look at what the questions are on a separate sheet of notebook paper or plain paper, or whiteboards even, if you have a whiteboard at your home and you can use that. You can take and write down what the original problem is, make sure you have the problem number, show your work, write your answer, and I'm more than happy to take and grade it that way. So trying to be as easy as possible with figuring out how to take and get those solutions for all of you. So whichever one of those methods you're most comfortable with, by all means do that. If you're not sure which way to do it, you want to ask me, feel free to email me, of course. I'll work with you in any way possible to take and make this as easy as possible for you guys. I want to keep it simple. So with that being said, we're going to take a look at 7.6. After we finish that, I will run through each of the sections on the review and then tell you a little bit about the chapter test as well. So you're going to have a lot in this video, but it will be your only video this week. So typically you'll have multiple videos per week with different lessons involved. So for this one video, but that's because you guys have the review and then a tiny little test of only 6 questions. So it's going to be a test that only has 6 questions that you're going to have to take and do, and that will all be on Canvas. So submission, and with that being said, submissions for homework assignments, you can submit them on Canvas to me. I'll have that available, or you can always email them to me. That is perfectly fine, or share them with me, whatever works best for you. Okay? All right, so let's get started on 7.6. So we're looking at justifying our constructions. So we're basically just going to examine constructions a little bit. For the most part, we're going to just look at review, essentially, looking at our different properties that we know about with rotational symmetry and taking and performing rotations or reflections, things like that. So for the first section, we are looking at rotational symmetry in our polygons, specifically in our regular polygons. So what angles of rotational symmetry are there for a regular pentagon? So remember, with regular figures, all we have to take and do is take 360 and divide it by the number of sides there are. So a pentagon has 5 sides. So we're going to take 360 and divide it by 5. So if we take that 360 and divide it by 5, we will get 72. So that means our answer for this one is multiples of 72. So remember, when we're dealing with those rotational symmetries, we technically have 72, 144, 216, 288, and 360. So we have all of those angles are angles of rotational symmetry. So we just want to say multiples of 72. You do not have to write out all of the multiples of 72 up until 360. You can just say multiples of 72 degrees. And that'll be your answer. So that's what you're doing on the first 2. So I did the first one with you. So you'll do this on the second one. For the third one, you have the angle of rotational symmetry. What you're trying to find is the number of sides. So doing this process in reverse. Okay? All right. For problems 4 and 5, these are taking and doing transformations. So you're given 2 graphs, one for 4, one for 5. For 4, it wants you to take and reflect the point P over the line J. So remember, how we take and do this is you're going to find the slope of the line J. So calculate the slope of it. Then, to take and see where it would reflect to, you're going to do the opposite reciprocal. So remember, opposite reciprocal of the slope you found here. That'll be the slope to go from P to P prime, okay? So remember that. That's what you're going to do for 4. So if we look at 4, I will tell you the slope of line J is a negative 1/7. So that means for the opposite reciprocal, it'll be 7/1. So going from P to P prime, you will have a slope of 7/1. Using that, you will take and find where P prime is. Okay? So number 5, very similar, but with this one, you're rotating point P 90 degrees clockwise about point C. Now, make note, it is about point C, so that means we can't use our little rules that we have for rotating 90 degrees. Instead, we find the slope from C to P, so just finding the slope from between those 2 points, and then, once again, opposite reciprocal, because that's going to get us that 90-degree rotation, because opposite reciprocal slopes are perpendicular lines, which give us that 90 degrees. So once again, find the slope from C to P, do the opposite reciprocal slope, and then take that from C to your P prime. That'll get you your P prime there. Okay? All right, so that first page should be fairly easy. I'm hoping all of this should be hopefully fairly easy. It's just review. Now, for questions 6 through 8, you do not have to do them. On your review, you will not have any constructions. On your test, you will not have any constructions. So I'm going to save you the pain, especially for those of you if you don't have your workbook, of having to take and try and do these constructions without having it, because that'd be very difficult. So you do not have to do 6 through 8. So you can just cross those off. So that means when you send me pictures of your workbooks, you do not have to send me that page, because that whole entire page is just doing these constructions. So don't do 6 through 8. Okay? Excellent. All right, 9 through 14. we've done this before. We've done this multiple times, actually. We are taking and finding the distance and the slope between the 2 points. So my hope is you're pretty comfortable with this. So remember, slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if we look at number 9a, we have the point -2, 8 and the point 3, -4. So starting out our slope, we're going to have -4 minus 8, which is -12, over 3 minus -2, so really 3 plus 2, which is 5. So there is our answer to 9a. It's -12 over 5. So there's part A. For part B, we find the distance. Now, remember, we've done this before. We don't actually have the distance formula yet, but to find the distance, we're just going to square the numerator and square the denominator of our slope, because this forms our triangle for us. So we have, so for part B, 12 squared plus 5 squared equals our c squared, because remember, these will all make right triangles. Sorry, that's kind of hard to see. So 12 squared is 144. 5 squared is 25 equals our c squared. Now, some of you are probably wondering if I've done something wrong, because I dropped off the negative on my 12 when I wrote it out. That is perfectly acceptable, because when we take and square a negative number, it's going to end up a positive number anyways. So rather than accidentally keeping the negative when we get to the 144, dropping that negative off right here is a perfectly acceptable way to take and make sure that we're dealing with positive numbers. If we think about this as the Pythagorean theorem, we can't have -12 as a side length, but we can have 12 as a side length. So that's why I keep these always positive. That also eliminates any chance of making an error. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. So now what we have to take and do is we're going to take 144 and add 25 to it, which gets us 169 equals c squared. And so then, last but not least, we have to take the square root of both sides to find out what just c is, or what the distance is. So square root, and the square root of 169 is 13. So your answer for the distance between these 2 points would be the 13. Excellent. All right, so you guys have done this before, so I'm pretty confident you will have no issues taking and completing the 9 through 14. Like I said, when you're dealing with the distance, you will never have a negative number. We can't have a negative distance. That's just not possible. We can't go a negative distance. Distance will always be positive. So if you end up with a negative for your distance, you've done something wrong. So double check your signs, make sure they're always positive. But like I said, this is what you guys are taking and gonna finish up. So just doing the 1 through 5 and then 9 through 14 on 7-6, okay? Now, like I said, I am going to take and give you guys the review in a document. So you'll get that document. It's gonna look just like this. So I know it's a little hard to see since it's printed and it's fairly light. But the first section you are taking, and you've got the pre-image, and then it's got different transformations. Now I know for this, it's going to be kind of complicated to take and do since you don't actually physically have this. So for these first 4 questions, you can take and just write down what the coordinates are. So write what the original coordinates of the polygon what they are, and then take and say A prime, B prime, C prime. So like with this first one, I think they're not labeled, but you can label them. So have A prime, B prime, C prime. Say what those new coordinates would be after you go up 3 and to the right 2. Then say what the coordinates would be for A double prime, B double prime, C double prime for reflecting over the y-axis. Now I know this is going to be a little complicated since you won't have this physical copy. If you can print it out, then you'll be in luck. If you can't, it'll be a little bit harder, but I'm hoping you'll be able to do it. If you can't, this part, if you can't do these first 4 questions, that's okay. It will not count against you, because I know trying to take and do transformations without actually being able to physically do them can be very complicated. So Give it your best shot. Do try. Like I said, you can use the coordinates instead of actually drawing it out. Or if you have graph paper at home, you can graph this down and then do that separately. That is an excellent way to take and do this, by all means. So for the next section, you're finding the sequence of transformations. So you've already got both your pre-image and your image. You're just figuring out how to go between the two. Then the next section, we're saying whether or not the triangles are congruent. So remember, we have 4 possible ways to prove that triangles are congruent. We have side, 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 angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Those are the only 4 that work. If it's not one of those 4, then it's not possible. And remember, not all of the information may be marked in your figures. So if we have vertical angles, so anytime it makes an X with our figures, the angles across from each other will always be congruent. If the 2 triangles share a side, that side will always be congruent. Sometimes we don't take and explicitly say those things because they're things that we should know based on our previous knowledge and logic. So keep that in mind as you're taking and looking at these. The next section is, given the congruent statement, determine whether or not the given parts are congruent. So I've wrote out the congruent statement for you, and then I've said, so in this first one, it says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. AC is congruent to DF. So you have to take and determine, because we know with congruent statements, they have the congruent parts are corresponding. So that means A has to be congruent to D, B has to be congruent to E, C has to be congruent to F. So with that in mind, you have to determine, is AC congruent to DF based on where they're placed within that congruent statement, okay? All right, and the last section, is just like what we did on the last assignment. So it's looking at the slope and distance between these 2 points. So make sure you do both parts. You need both the slope and the distance for each of these, okay? Now, like I said, your test will have 6 questions on it. You're going to have, it's 6 questions, so it shouldn't be too bad. You're going to have a question that deals with the slope and distance. You're going to have 2 congruent statement problems, just like on this review. You're going to have 2 problems of the triangles congruent, so using those 4 ways that we know to prove triangles are congruent. You're going to have 2 questions about that. And then you're going to have 1 question where you have to state what the sequence of transformations are. So I don't anticipate any of you having a problem with this. I think you guys will be pretty successful with it. But if you do have questions, please feel free to email me. I will be checking my email as frequently as I can. Hopefully I'll catch you and be able to help you as best as possible. On Canvas, you will see all of the due dates. You'll have all of that information. I will write out my little bit about the assignments, the different ways you can submit them to me, how you can do them, depending on if you have a workbook or not, all of that information. I will write that out, so because I know me just saying all of this at you is a lot to take in. I will also talk about it when we have our full class meeting as well for our weekly class time. So I'll talk to you about that then, just to hopefully take care of any questions you might have. Okay? All right. I also am taking and doing where I have a key phrase within my video lesson, so that way you have to pay attention and you have to find it. This one I kind of left it to the end, so you guys are in luck. You just had to make it all the way to the end and figure out what it is. Our key phrase for today is transformations. So there will be a assignment on Canvas where you will submit to me what the key phrase is, and you will get credit for this. So this is just ensuring that you guys are watching my videos and are following along to promote your learning as we're going through this remote learning time. So like I said, that keyword, make sure you write it down or go straight to Canvas after this, is transformations. All right? All right. Hope you guys do well on this. If you have questions, like I said, please do not hesitate to take and email me, and I will try my best to help you through it. I will have office hours once we start, and so you can always contact me then. We can do Zoom meetings, whatever you guys need to get you through this, okay? All right. Have a great week.